Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome back to the channel, and those who are coming for the very first time, welcome to the channel. I'm your host Akash Yadav and I'm a senior UX manager at Myntra.com. Myntra.com is a leading fashion e-commerce platform in India. Today's video is actually a part of a design system explainer series. So it'll contain 5 to 6 bite-sized videos to explain everything about the fundamentals of design system and how can you build one from scratch. So if you're interested, do subscribe to the channel so that you get notified whenever I drop the rest of the videos for this series. And this is the part 1 of the series, which is Introduction to Design System. So without further ado, let's get started. So let's first understand what exactly is a design system. So by definition, a design system is a collection of reusable components. And by reusable components, we mean really fundamental level of components like typography, color, interactions, UI components like buttons, checkboxes, etc. Guided by a clear set of standards or instructions that can be assembled together to build any number of applications. So what that means is that you have your fundamental level of components, be it UI component, interaction component, typography, color, and on top of it you also have some set of instruction on how they can be used and how they cannot be used. And using those two things, you build complex pages, patterns, and even applications, right? So those instructions help you to use those components in a way so that you can build different applications for your organization. And in totality, this entire thing is known as a design system. So if I can quickly explain you more gently with this example of a Lego block. So assume that all these reusable components are these Lego blocks. And these Lego blocks cannot be broken down any further. So these are the very bare bone fundamental entity in the Lego blocks. Now using these Lego blocks, you can build either a house, a submarine, or even this complex pyramid. The only difference is the instruction on how to build these three things. So you can use the same Lego blocks, Lego building blocks, but you need different set of different instruction book to build a house or a submarine or a pyramid. So instruction book plus that Lego blocks together creates a design system for Lego, if I would say, right? So this is a very basic understanding. If I hope you understood the analogy, right, on how design system works. So this entire ensemble may be called as a design system. Okay. Moving on to our next segment, which is basically what is the difference between a design system and a style guide or a pattern library. So a lot of times when you search design system, you also get references for style guides or pattern library, and people are often really confused between these terms. A style guide or a pattern library is mostly UI centric, and it's exactly what you build in Figma. So it's mostly those color, typography, UI elements like buttons, checkboxes, input boxes, right? All of these things are basically style guide and pattern library. Whereas a design system is much more than a UI system. A design system consists of not just UI element, but also consists of guidelines, visual references or visual mood boards, if I would say, design principles of creating interfaces, what are do's and what are don'ts, right? Other design deliverables, tone of voice, how the voice should be and how the language should be on your product should be, interactions, illustrations, how the illustration and how the theme of the illustration should be, and even code snippets as well. So a design system is much more bigger of a term. It encapsulates both style guide or pattern library, whereas a style guide or pattern library is mostly UI centric, the one that we usually build in Figma, okay, or other tools like Sketch and XD. So that's the difference between a design system and a style guide. So make sure you don't do this mistake and next time somebody asks you about design systems. So here's a very simple example on how tone changes on different platforms. So on the left you have Flipkart.com and on the right you have Amazon.com, and both are e-commerce platform here in India. So if you see, Flipkart.com calls everything as my orders, my wish list, my carts, whereas Amazon.com calls it as your orders, your wish list, your account. So there is a tone difference, and that tone difference is coming because they both have different guidelines around the language and the perceived tone. So they have different system and they have different guidelines around this, right? So here's one simple example of how things changes with tone. Why do you want to use a design system? Like, what is the benefit of using a design system? So first of all, design system can be created and replicated quickly at a scale. Since now you have designed everything at a very bare bone level, you can keep on reusing them. So reusability is a very big factor in design systems. So since you are already have those things available, you can quickly assemble those things together and quickly build things at a scale. right? And it'll also elevates the strain on design resources. So for example, every time you're designing a button, you don't have to think about what should be the border radius, what should be the color, what should be the font in that button should be, because you have already defined those in the design system. So now it removes that additional calculation that goes in building those system, and now you can focus on more complex problems and actually solving the design problem rather than solving a design UI problem, right? So you have all those things settled up. Now you can focus on bigger set of problems, bigger set of design problems. It also creates a unified language. So if you're working with a big company and you want everything to be looking consistent, so you have to have a single source of truth. Having a design system brings that unified language together so that everything looks cohesive, even if it's designed by different teams. Since everyone is using the same design system, the entire thing, whatever they will be building, will look the same way, right? And it also adds, like needless to say, it also adds visual consistency across products, channels, and different departments, right? So this is a very bare bone or very simple example of why we should use a design system. And design system is very, very essential these days in every company. Every company and bigger organization do even have a separate team for design systems. So they have different set of designers, developers who look after design systems altogether. So design system is really important for any organization. Now that we understood what exactly the design system is and why we need a design system, let's understand the elements that build up a design system. So there are two components in design system. First is a design repository, and the second is the people who manages it. So let's first talk about the design repository. A design repository can take in any form, but they often contain style guide, component library, and a pattern library. So let's first define what exactly is a style guide. A style guide contains specific implementation, guidelines, visual references, and design principles for creating interfaces and other design deliverables. So basically the thing that we build on Figma, and apart from that, we also build instructions on top of it, like how can we use these elements, for example, how to use those colors, secondary, primary, tertiary, how to use text, H1, H2, H3, those markings, right? How to use a button, selected, deselected, focused, all these different states of things, right? And where and how they can be used is basically what style guide contains. So style guide contains the components as well as it also contains the implementation guidelines. Okay, the most common ones actually tend to focus on branding, so colors, typography, print media, logos, right? And it also provides guidance for content such as voice and tone of the language. So for example, if a pop-up comes in or if it's a warning message, how the language should be. Should it be soft? Should it be formal? Should it be gentle, right? And it also contains interaction design standards. So how the interaction should be in an app. So all of these standard guidelines is what is present in the style guide. Okay. And here is example of MailChimp's style guide where they have written down how to write a proper legal content. So for everything, like for social media, for newsletters, for writing goals, voice and tone, they have mentioned out everything else. So you can go and check it out on their website and how they have presented this style guide for content writing. The next thing that I explained was component library. So component library, or also known as design library, is what many people associate with design systems, but actually it's not. These are the libraries that we defined that contains the reusable UI elements, and this is the component library is the one that we build in Figma or in Sketch or XD. So this is what we show it and we build in asset libraries, and then designers can pick it, drag and drop, and build other things out of it, right? So component library is the one. And usually in bigger organization, whatever component that we build for Figma, there's a counterpart that is being designed or is being developed by the team, the developer team. So they also have a code snippet for that same component, so that the same way you are using design elements, they will also be using the code elements so as to build their own component library in code world. Okay. And in addition to visual examples, they also include component name, specific UI component name. So I'm just explaining what goes into building components. So once you design a component, you also have to name the component. You also have to add description. You also have to have attributions like color, size, shape, and copy, different states that you also have to mention. What are the different default states, subsequent changes. And as I said, you also have a code snippet. So let's say if you're defining 5 types of button, then you also have 5 types of code snippet of those buttons that the developers will be building. So your component library is this Figma plus the code snippet. Okay. And here is an example of Google's material design, where on the left you will see radio buttons and on the right you will see the implementation in code as well. So the third thing is called pattern library. Now pattern library and component library are used synonymously, but they are really different than each other. Component library specifically targets UI elements, whereas a pattern library actually is a collection of UI groupings or layouts. So for example, using buttons, text, colors, backgrounds, images, interaction, you can now build a separate page altogether. You can build a modal, you can build a pop-up, you can build a page altogether, you can build multiple pages, right? You can build a navigation header. So using those smaller components, the components are really bare bone. Using those components, you can now build different groupings, a different compound group, and that compound element is basically known as a pattern or a pattern library. So pattern library is really high level, which is built from components. And again, the main aim for building a pattern library is again to increase usability. So if you have created a page already, if you have created a navigation header already, if you build a library out of it, then anyone can drag and drop and use it really easily. Just change a few things and you're good to go. So for example, here is an example of Airbnb's pattern library. And if you see, then we have some cards, we have some rows, and we have some basically a full page. And if you see, these are designed using smaller components. So for example, you have an image component, text component. Here you have again avatar component, some icons, right? All of these are like very bare bone elements that can be combined or grouped together to build more complex or compound groupings, and they are known as these cards, rows, and pages. So this is what a pattern library is. And it now comes to the last part of the design system, which is basically a design system team, the people who build and manages the design system. So whether created or adapted, a design system requires continuous maintenance and oversight to make sure that it doesn't get outdated, obsolete, and overcrowded with redundant entities or submissions. As your company is growing, as the company is getting bigger, a number of products are getting bigger, your design system is also getting bigger and evolving with it. So you need somebody who can manage it, otherwise it will get obsolete really quickly. You also need a team that can make sure that the design system is adapted across the cross-functional team and everybody is following it. So design system team is basically a group of people who are the guardians of the design system for a company. They are the ones who are making sure that there is coherency, there is a consistency in what is being built under the company. Now, to maintain a design system, typically you need a bare minimum of at least one interaction designer, one visual designer, one developer, and somebody from the UX writing team who can help you with the interaction guidelines or the language recommendations part for the design system, right? So you need at least minimum of these people. You also need a buy-in from at least a senior leadership team, because sometimes people on the senior leadership or the business level fail to understand the significance of design system because it does not have an immediate business ROI or impact. So the team at the higher level may not understand the intricacy and may not understand the importance of a design system. So you need somebody at a leadership level to have a buy-in in the building of design systems so that they can fund the team who is managing the design system. Typically bigger companies like Google, Facebook, Instagram, Atlassian, all of these companies have a separate team dedicated for design system, for maintaining and updating the design system. So if you're working in a small company, make sure you have at least a bare minimum of team that can maintain the design system, and you have a buy-in from your senior leadership. So let's quickly recap what we have learned so far. So a design system typically has 4 parts. So you have a style guide component, you have a component library, you have a pattern library, and then you have the design team. Okay. And style guide typically contains all the guidelines around language, typography, color, branding, right? So I'll say type, color, branding, interaction guidelines, right? And tone and voice, language recommendation. All of these are basically in the style guide. Then you have the component library, which is basically your UI element specific. So you have all your UI elements here, which is basically your buttons, text boxes, input fields, check boxes, everything in the UI space will be in your component library. and then you have your pattern library. So in pattern library, you will have grouping of these compound elements. So for example, navigation header, bottom navigations, modals, okay, notifications, all of these which basically are combined together. The smaller UI elements are combined together to build bigger patterns, pages, right? So you'll have pattern library that will contain all of this. And the last thing that you have is your basically a design team, which contains, which consists of basically designers, then you have developers, then you have interaction designers and UX writers. Okay. So this is an overall design system overview, what you have in the design system. And I hope you understood the basic of design system. So next time somebody asks you what exactly is the design system, so I hope you are not going to get confused. And that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you liked this video. So if you liked, just like this video, share this video with everyone, and do subscribe so that you get notified when I release the part 2. I'll be releasing the part 2 of this video really soon. And don't forget to comment and let me know if you like this video or not. And yeah, I'll see you in my next video. Take care. Bye-bye.